Tonight I ordered a targeted military strike on the airfield in Syria from where the chemical attack was launched. It is in this vital national security interest of the United States to prevent and deter the spread and use of deadly chemical weapons.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to The Five. I'm Kimberly Guilfoyle, and we have brand new developments and reaction tonight to President Trump's decisive response to Tuesday's heinous chemical attack in Syria. With last night's strike on a Syrian air base, he sent a clear message to Bashar Assad and leaders of other rogue regimes. The rest of the world will not tolerate the use of weapons of mass destruction. Russia has condemned our military action and now has one of its warships steaming toward our two destroyers that launched the missiles. More on that in a moment. President Trump hasn't said more about the strike today. He's continuing his talks with China's President Xi Jinping about North Korea's arsenal. Let's bring in our chief White House correspondent, John Roberts, who is live in Palm Beach, Florida. John.
Kimberly, good afternoon to you. Of course, the big question in all of this is what comes next from two big standpoints. First of all, will Bashar al-Assad, the president of Syria, come to heel? And what is this going to do about U.S.-Russia relations, which are not particularly good at this point and look like they could be getting worse? First of all, on the first question, the United States, President Trump sent a very big message to Bashar al-Assad saying, if you keep doing what you're doing, you stand to lose everything. And today at the United Nations, the UN Ambassador Nikki Haley said that the United States is prepared to do more, though she hopes that that is not necessary. And Secretary of the Treasury Steve Mnuchin a short time ago made some news saying that the United States will soon be announcing additional sanctions on Syria in an effort to curb this behavior, believing that depriving people of doing business with Syria will help bring Bashar al-Assad to heel. Also, the Secretary of State, Rex Tillerson, said that they did not attack the runway at that air base. There was some news that some flights were still taking off from there. He said they did not attack the runway because it's a hardened runway, and even if they did damage it a bit, that could be fixed in hours. Now, to the second question of what will this do to U.S.-Russia relations, we see very strident public statements from people like the spokesperson for President Vladimir Putin, the foreign minister Sergei Lavrov, and the prime minister Dmitry Medvedev. However, I'm being told that while the public statements are somewhat strident, that the back-channel diplomatic communications between the United States and Russia have actually had very little blowback. Still, Secretary Tillerson said he is disappointed but not surprised by what he's hearing in public from Russia, because that shows that they are still backing Bashar al-Assad. The Secretary of State is headed to Moscow next week. He'll be having talks with his foreign minister counterpart there, Sergei Lavrov, next week. So that, I think, really will begin to tell the tale, Kimberly, as to how this is going to be going forward between the United States and Russia. But certainly it would seem to put to rest a lot of the talk that President Trump has been trying to coddle Russia. Wouldn't you say? I would say. All right. Thanks, John, for that important update. And most of the world backs our strike, but not Iran, and especially not Syria's greatest ally, Russia. Vladimir Putin calls the military action illegal and a blow to U.S.-Russian relations. He's deployed one of his warships to the eastern Mediterranean to head toward our two Navy destroyers that launched the airstrikes last night. Secretary of State Rex Tillerson goes to Russia next week. Will he be able to get the country to rethink its support for Bashar Assad? So, Dana, very important international developments overnight with a very bold, decisive move by President Trump, and one that some critics are saying is not in accord with prior statements that he has made.
Which I think is fine. I mean, it is a little bit jarring for people who might have been supportive of such action when President Obama faced the same decision and then didn't do it. And then, anyway, I feel like what President Trump did last night was put America back on the geopolitical map. That for many years, these atrocities, including other chemical weapons that were being used, like chlorine gas, like how are we defining those in the last several years, where basically we're a hands-off approach? And what Rex Tillerson, the Secretary of State, said last night is that this was in America's national interest. And I think that's important for lots of the rest of the discussion that we'll have today, and for the American people to understand that he said if there are weapons of this nature available in Syria, the ability to secure those weapons and not have them fall into the hands of those who would bring those weapons to our shores and harm American citizens, that this was one of the reasons that it had to be done. I also feel like there's no doubt that the world leaders have been trying to figure President Trump out since November 8th, and they got clarity last night. Final point from me is that any president, and President Bush used to talk about this, that any president is speaking to multiple audiences all at once. So our allies, our enemies, the American people, and our military. And I think what this also said to our military is that the strategy might not be perfect yet. It might not have been laid out. They've been working on a Syria strategy, the National Security Council and DOD. It's not quite there. This activity by Assad basically leapfrogged to the head of the line, and he decided to act. And I feel like he stood up for the decency that I believe makes America exceptional.
All right. So, Eric, you have been pretty firm in your resolve in terms of saying that we should not get involved in what's going on despite the humanitarian tragedy that obviously, affects everyone. How do you feel now in the aftermath and, seeing the specificity of the target and how it went down?
And so I saw this last night. I was watching it all develop. And I think, listen, so I woke up today and then we had the whole Gorsuch meeting. I think today President Trump proved why I voted for President Trump and why a lot of people ended up voting for President Trump. On one hand, you have a conservative Supreme Court. It's got lost in the shuffle of what went on last night. But on the other hand, even though I disagree with attacking Syria with military force, he acted, as Dana points out, very decisively. We talked about it all day. But more importantly, for me, is he did it with Chinese President Xi right next to him, right? Just finishing dinner, goes ahead and calls for the launch. And now, whether or not the launch, the attack on the 59 Tomahawks that hit Syria are going to have effect on Bashar al-Assad, maybe it won't even have an effect. The effect that it did create was it told not only Kim Jong-un, his saber rattling going on there, you better watch out to him. But also, that Chinese president realizes who he's dealing with right now. He's dealing with a man who's willing to strike another sovereign country while he's just finishing up a dinner with the other superpower on the globe. I mean,
and
there's
step out
no
and make a statement about it.
that Donald Trump, I disagree with the attack on Syria, but is definitive, decisive, and got the American people behind him with that launch. So I actually applaud what he did there, even though I disagree with the tactic.
There was no U.S. Troops on the ground to accomplish the goals. They were able to take out those sites. It was a very successful mission, so at least those aren't things that you object to.
I'm not sure the success has anything to do with the 59 that hit that airport. I think the success will have to do with the optics of it around the world.
All right, so I want to get your reaction on this, and we were just talking about this yesterday in terms of the options with Jennifer Griffin, and this is one of the things that I asked her about was alternative sites and perhaps hitting specifically the chemical sites and the air bases, notifying the Russians so that they have time. They had an hour to get out.
So what we know from the options that were given to President Trump by the Defense Department and his National Security Council is that he accepted the least powerful method, which was a limited cruise missile strike against specific air bases. So he didn't go after Assad personally. He didn't bomb his troops. No, he went after these air bases. They can be reconstructed. The question for me, and I think for lots of people in the Congress, is what's the end game? Because if you do, in fact, destabilize Syria by hurting Assad, do you plan then to go in and take over Syria? Oh, my goodness. I think that's what Eric Bolling is concerned about, is in terms of a prolonged U.S. military commitment that would mimic something like what happened when we went into Iraq, or our ongoing commitment in terms of Afghanistan. And we do have troops on the ground, as we heard yesterday, and those troops could be targeted for repercussions, either troops in Syria or in Afghanistan, even Turkey. So all of that is at play. But today, I think in the Congress, you saw something that was not, Kimberly, divided by Republican versus Democrat, but by people saying, so if this is a one-time, one-off deal, okay, but we don't know the end game. And if you're thinking, President Trump, about putting Americans on the ground, you know what? You better come to Congress. And don't forget, Trump is the guy who said during the campaign, unless there's a clear U.S. economic interest or national security interest. Dana says, well, the gas is, I think that's bogus. I don't see how that's going to be a clear national security
Really?
interest for us. I don't, because I don't think
if the rest of their stockpile gets...
They don't have the capacity. Nobody has the capacity to bring it over here. In fact, the guy who has the capacity apparently would be Kim Jong-un over in North Korea. I don't think that's it. So what changed in Donald Trump's mind to say all of a sudden this impacts America? He has been making the case when he condemned Obama and even during the campaign to Clinton. There's no American interest in this. Stay out of it.
Right, but he also wasn't president then, and now he's president. He's privy to all the national security and intelligence reports and options, and it's his call. And based on those evaluations, he made it. Greg, can you talk to me a little bit about Russia, because they were given notification so that they were able to make sure that none of their personnel
I thought that was really nice
were in
of us.
the area.
It was really nice. We let them know ahead of time. I love what this will do to the Russian narrative on other networks. Like, I guess Trump isn't Putin's puppet. The thing is, though, I think people are making a lot out of this. This is not war. This is the military equivalent of a public spanking. Assad just got whacked in aisle 3 of Walmart in front of all of his classmates. And that's the important thing. Yeah, it does. It's humiliating. Trump was tested by Assad, and he answered unlike President Obama. He kicked back hard. He didn't blink. This is important, and it's a message that is being sent to North Korea, to Iran, to China, to Russia, that it's not about necessarily winning right now. It's about sending a clear message that there's a new sheriff in town. You can't expect him to do the predictable. There are a number of good things. I happen to agree with this.
Yes.
And I believe that it was when you talk about atrocity, when you talk about gassing kids, this to me feels like a reasonable response. I mean, I don't understand.
Not proportional.
This is a targeted, specific, measured response. It also says, I'm committing to a red line. That's kind of refreshing. You know, it refutes the Putin's puppet narrative, and it shows that Trump is capable of surprising everyone from enemies to allies, and that's something he said he would do, and he did it. I think it's funny that he did it while he was having dinner with China. Well, that's like that's like essentially having a meeting and taking a phone call. You know, it does show that you can multitask, which often confuses other politicians. They're like, how can you do this and how can you do this? Well, he just does it. So there.
So Rand Paul called me today, and he said, let's have a little bit of discussion about what this is all about. And he knows where I am, that I'm in the camp that would disagree with that assessment that this actually changed anyone's mind in Syria. Like Assad, as Juan points out, was in Damascus, not at the airport, and he still has the capability to do it if he chooses to do it. I'm not sure that's going to change. But he said, and again, I asked Jennifer Griffin yesterday, what's the administration's purpose or the military's purpose here? Is it to kill Assad? And she specifically said, not only not kill Assad, but not even regime change.
Well, first of all, killing Assad would be illegal. You cannot kill another world leader.
Russia says that what we did today was illegal.
Even if you really want to, you should. No one's ever going to say that's your goal.
But the Russians say what we did was an attack on a sovereign nation.
But the question is, then what, though? If it's not regime change and it's not kill Assad, then what?
Well, maybe it's, first of all, don't use that gas again.
Right.
Number one, and then we'll figure out the rest later. And by the way, I don't care what Russia says about, oh, the United States attacked a sovereign country. Are you kidding me? Ukraine and Crimea? Give me a break. That is ultimate fake news from.
Well, you know what the worst of it was? They also said that they don't think that this was caused by the chemical attack. They think this was pre-planned by the Trump administration, which, are you talking about?
This is the
CIA. It's a false flag by the CIA.
This is the problem of calling legitimate news fake news, because what Russia does in terms of trying to deal with its domestic audience is spread fake news, actual fake news. That is not true.
I agree it's not true.
And the ridiculous conspiracy theories from even within the United States that somehow the rebels were actually put the chemical gas into the planes that Assad then used on us. And it was actually like some evil genius that figured that out. Like, our military has the video that shows it was their planes that were doing it.
Yeah,
the best response when somebody brings up, oh, that's false flag, that the chemical attack is a false flag, they go, oh, yeah, and so was our retaliation. That was a false flag as well. It's all complete
false
theater. Right. So you can't disprove me either.
Yeah, but it certainly has changed the geopolitical climate. But what a strong message to say the U.S. is not afraid to stand alone and act unilaterally, and that's what President Trump did last night.